beautiful time, don't we? A time when not everyone tries to get a super sport to go touring. A time when not everyone gets a naked bike and presumes it can go off-road. A time where manufacturers are finally taking into account our Indian road conditions and trying to compete for our money with providing suitable products. Or so I hope. You see, everyone wants to tour these days, and given our road conditions, what makes for better tourers than adventure bikes? But what if you wanted your slice of touring without the plate called adventure? That's where these two new beautiful motorcycles come in. Kawasaki's updated Versys 650 that gets a new TFT screen, 2 levels of traction control, a brand new front end design, and an adjustable windshield, along with an LED headlamp. The Triumph Tiger Sport 660, however, is brand new from the ground up, and though it does share its underpinnings with its naked counterpart, it aims to be the benchmark in this segment. This is Gavin Rodriguez from Top Gear India, and without any further ado, let's dive into the design. In terms of design, the Kawasaki follows its typical sharp aesthetics and looks the sportier and more proportionate of the two. It's taller, broader and longer here, and it's pretty evident with these two side by side. I love the new aggressive headlamp design, which is now shared across many Kawasaki motorcycles. It looks striking in its traditional color, but if this isn't up your taste, then there's a shade of grey and black that Kawasaki offers too. Overall, the Kawasaki is the better looking one from the front. When you move to the rear, the Kawasaki's tail section looks a bit more bulky and bulbous in comparison. The new tail lamp is this smoked finish that it looks nice individually, but doesn't seem to go with the overall aesthetics of the motorcycle and does come off looking like an aftermarket unit. The Tiger Sport has a more somber design language with minimalist elements. Even in this shade of red, it can easily blend into a sea of motorcycles, and I for one quite like how understated it is. Triumph's design has always usually been that kind, and if you want your motorcycle to look more elegant and reserved, this one would be right up your alley. However, since we've got these two side by side, I have to admit that I like the Kawasaki design slightly better, especially in its latest avatar. The Triumph Tiger Sport is a lot smaller in terms of proportions and looks a lot more compact. Sure, it is the more athletic looking motorcycle, especially when you come over to the rear. It has this beautiful sleek tail lamp design. When it comes down to utility, the Kawasaki seems a bit more utilitarian looking than the Tiger Sport. It's got more mounting points for your luggage. And sure, both these motorcycles come with pannier mounting points. However, it just seems like the Tiger is not nearly as touring ready as the Versys over here. In terms of appearance, I would say that the Versys headlamp looks a lot smarter, looks a lot more aggressive, and looks a lot more eye-catchy and upmarket. However, when you actually use these headlamps, you notice that the Versys headlamp is honestly, it's adequate. It's not that great, and you will definitely need auxiliary lamps to go with this motorcycle because the highway performance of these headlamps are just not what you'd expect from a headlamp of this size and stature. However, the Tiger Sport on the other hand, the headlamp works much better, is much clearer, and even though if you're traveling on the highway, I would recommend getting auxiliaries, but if you chose not to, these still do just fine. For someone of my height, I don't find it very hard to flat foot on this motorcycle, but anyone shorter could find it a bit challenging, not because of the seat height, but because how broad the seat is. That could be a problem. Now, ergonomically, this motorcycle is quite comfortable, honestly. It's got nice thick seats, and you and your pillion, it's got a pretty wide and long seat for the pillion. So it's a very accommodating motorcycle for two people. One thing that I have to notice is that the leg space over here that you have with the Versys is a little bit less than you do on the Tiger Sport over there. So you see, in the Tiger Sport, your legs are comparatively more down. I feel like I'm sitting slightly more knees up over here, and this could be personal preference, but it's just something I don't personally prefer, but it is what it is. Now you do get an adjustable windshield over here, but you need two hands in order to adjust it, and there's a clear warning over here that tells you not to adjust the windshield while riding. So yeah, every time you'll have to take a stop. Not to say that you won't have to do the same thing over there, but the windshield is quite nice. However, there is quite a bit of wind buffeting for someone of my height. So I find myself, if I'm sitting somewhere around here, the wind passes just above me, otherwise the wind just hitting my face. So I would say that you may have to check out Kawasaki's catalog because they have a list of accessories that can give you a better, wider windshield. But apart from that, the motorcycle is a very comfortable place to be. All your grips are easy to go, and it's not very hard to find a comfortable position in this motorcycle. Now, again, very easy to flat foot on the Tiger Sport. In fact, proportionately, it just feels like a smaller, more compact motorcycle, making it easy to maneuver, not just in parking spots, but just in general. Everything reaches similarly, and you're not sitting leaned forward or back, just like the Versys, you're sitting pretty upright over here. The windshield here too is adjustable, but you will need both hands for this just because of how hard this windshield is. You know, it's not the smoothest going one, and Triumph says that they're working on it, but yeah, this can come sooner because this windshield, it's not the best. It's a bit easier to adjust over there, and here, even though I can do it with one hand, I still require two hands just because of the lack of smoothness over here. Now the seat is slightly thinner, and I would say that despite having the same amount of length, it's a bit more comfortable to carry a pillion on the Versys than it is here. But you can still carry a pillion over here, it just won't be as comfortable. The seat's slightly thin, it's pretty narrow under you, so it's much easier to move around the bike while you're riding around corners. But apart from that, if I had to choose just down to comfort, I would say that they're both very comfortable motorcycles, and it just comes down to personal preference. However, if I had to pick one, the more comfortable one that I found so far, I would say that it's probably the Versys in terms of comfort. But it's a more dusk and dawn difference than a night and day difference. In terms of performance, the engine on the Tiger Sport is just simply explosive. I mean, the inline 3 loves to scream, it loves to rev, it goes hard, it doesn't go home. Well, peak power over here, which is about 80 bhp, kicks in only after 10,500 rpm, which just lets you know how high and how well you have to rev this motorcycle to get the most out of it. It makes about 64 Newton meters of torque, so it produces more power and more torque than the Kawasaki. However, the Kawasaki offers the power and torque much lower down in the rev range, which makes it a bit more accessible in the city. The Triumph over here is the smoother one, it's the slicker one, and it's the quicker one. This one over here has an optional quick shifter. It's a bi-directional quick shifter, so it makes your life so much easier. Though the clutch is slightly heavier on the Tiger Sport, despite that, the quick shifter is just such a breeze that you don't ever bother looking at the clutch also. And even if you do use the clutch, it's a lot more engaging, it's a lot more fun. In terms of just sheer rideability and just performance, I think the Tiger Sport over here is my favorite one. However, there is a small fly in the ointment. All that performance comes at a slight cost, and that is the engine producing just slightly more heat. It's not something that'll just burn your legs off, but if you are riding in bumper-to-bumper traffic, which we did sometimes, you are going to notice that heat. Both these motorcycles come pretty well equipped in terms of braking. However, I think it's the tires that make a huge difference. For you see, the Triumph Tiger Sport over here gets Road 5 tires. These tires they're more up-to-date, they're just better, they're dual compound, they work better in the wet conditions, they work better in the dry conditions. All in all, these tires are just better overall, and they inspire so much more confidence to turn in harder, to brake later in fact, and it just makes the rideability of this motorcycle even better. So another thumbs up for me when it comes to braking for the Triumph. Now in terms of handling, let me tell you that the Versys is more compliant on highways, especially the bumpy kind, but when the road starts to get smooth, the Tiger Sport is much better. However, it's not that the Tiger Sport is not good on the highways, it's pretty good. It's just not good as the Versys. The Versys is slightly better, but that you give up a bit of composure on the highway for so much more performance around corners, and to me it's a justifiable trade. Someone like me who takes this bike out, who will go out for weekend rides every now and then, who goes for long tours and comes across a lot of corners, I think I would prefer this more accessible suspension setup that allows me to go faster around corners, as opposed to the one that's just a one-hit wonder on the highways. So suspension again over here gets a tick from me. However, there is one thing worth noting, that the suspension on the Versys is adjustable both front and rear, and that is something you don't get on the Tiger Sport, which is a bit disappointing considering that this is a bit more expensive. However, what it loses out for its higher price, it makes up for in other places. you see, the Versys 650 is not nearly as sporty as the Tiger Sport over here. Sure, you can ride fast. Sure, you can cruise at triple-digit speeds with no effort whatsoever. However, it won't give you the kick in the pants that you get out of the Tiger Sport. And when you think about the overall engine, the engine comes off as a bit more characterless, so to say. Don't get me wrong, the engine is pretty versatile and it'll do whatever you ask of it, but it doesn't have any key character traits. You know, if I blindfolded you and I picked you up from a Versys 650 and I put you on a Ninja 650, or I put you on a Z650, or I put you on a Vulcan, apart from the riding position, it'd be very hard for you to tell what motorcycle you're on. And I think that kind of speaks about how Kawasaki's recycled the same engine and made 4 motorcycles out of it. So character isn't something that you find in oodles over here with this motorcycle, which can be a bit of a letdown. However, I think it makes it a lot more easier for newer riders to get accommodated and find a lot easier and get comfortable to ride on longer roads without having to worry about, oh, the power band or the power being too intimidating. So in that sense, yes, the Versys is slightly more approachable, but not more exciting. Here is the big problem. The Versys 650 brakes are actually quite nice. However, I have 2 major gripes with the braking over here. And they have less to do with the brakes and more to do with 2 other elements. For starters, the pedal feel. When you're braking on this motorcycle, I just feel like the brake levers have a very wooden feeling. There is no communication, so to say. On the Tiger Sport, however, you can communicate just how much you're engaging the brakes. You know if you're engaging 10% of it, 20% of it, and it reacts accordingly. On the Versys, it bites, but it just doesn't communicate. So the brakes are good objectively, but as someone that's riding as an enthusiast, technically I wouldn't say that fun to engage, so to say. Another gripe that I have is the tires. The tires on the Versys 650 are adequate, so to say. And at this price point, I don't think adequate cuts it. These tires, they're not very good when the roads are dry. They're definitely not good when the roads are wet. And they take away from a lot of confidence that you may have accumulated along the way. The moment you hit the first corner, this does not inspire to lean in and just go for it. I feel like this tire takes away, it just adds too much to your brain when you're just trying to ride simply. And I really wish that Kawasaki offered better tires. Now, the clutch on the Kawasaki is very light and makes it very easy to use. However, for some reason on this particular motorcycle, the gear shift lever over there is just really hard. And it's not just me, it's my colleague Anant and a few other people in my team who rode this motorcycle and felt the same way. It's just very hard, and it could be down to this motorcycle only. And this is probably not a general Versys thing, but it's something you should consider and test ride and find out if this is something that maybe you face along your way. But when it comes to gear shifting, this doesn't have a quick shifter. It doesn't have an optional quick shifter either. It doesn't have a slipper clutch as far as I know. And it just takes away from the experience of shifting gears. It's a very clunky, do the job, just very basic, does the job kind of thing. So yeah, nothing too exciting. Now in terms of suspension, the Versys over here is the only one that has both front and rear adjustable suspension, while the Tiger Sport you can only adjust in the rear. So that being said, the suspension over here is on the softer side. So you see when you brake, there's a lot of brake dive. When you accelerate, the bike tends to squat. There's a lot of movement in the bike overall, and that can take away from a bit of a confidence. However, when you're on straight highways, bumpy highways, concrete road highways, you know, the kind that you get over here in Maharashtra very often, yeah, over there, this motorcycle does a great job. I think it soaks in a lot of bumps, and that is just me riding alone. With a pillion, I would say this is still just as comfortable. And if I am planning to go long distances on long straight highways and not planning to hit a lot of corners, I think this motorcycle would be my pick, just purely because of the suspension performance. The suspension seems to really stand out on this motorcycle, and it's not something that really triumphs the triumph, so to say, but when it comes to our highways, it definitely performs slightly better. Now, in terms of exhaust note, the Kawasaki over here is a parallel twin, so keep your expectations realistic. It's a good sounding exhaust, but it only sounds nice once you get past 6,000 RPM. At lower revs, it sounds too smooth, too sedated. Whereas when you move over to the Tiger Sport over here, this one definitely sounds the sportier one of the two. And if I was going on a long trip and I could only be stuck with one of the two voice notes, I think I would pick this one over here. It attracts so much attention, so many heads, you get thumbs ups. I mean, it doesn't make you feel like you're riding an adventure bike or a sports tourer, so to say. it genuinely feels like I'm riding a super sport. The Kawasaki Versys 650 gets an all-new 4.3-inch TFT screen over here, and you can control a few of the controls. Like for example, you see you can browse through different things over here. It tells you your average, the amount of time you rode, your range. You can whiz through the odometer, and if you press this little button over here that says set, you can choose two levels of traction control, level 1 and level 2. Level 2 being the more intrusive one, level 1 being the less intrusive one, and you have an option to turn it off. Well, this TFT is nice, however, I would have preferred it to be slightly more brighter given our hot conditions and our sunny days that we have. It can be a little difficult to read under bright sunlight, but for the most part, it does the job and it looks nice. On the Versys 650, both the levers are adjustable over here, and the switchgear quality, I would say, is a bit disappointing for the price that you're paying for this motorcycle. And especially when you compare it to the Tiger Sport, it is a bit down on quality, but if you look at this motorcycle standalone, I think overall this motorcycle is finished quite well. You get a few empty slots over here, and that is for your 12-volt charging socket, your USB charging socket, and an optional heated grips button if you install the accessory heated grips. Now, the Triumph over here gets a more conventional looking speedometer. There's no fancy TFT over here. You do get a small digital meter over here that tells you a few of the things that you want to know, like your average speed, your fuel efficiency, and so on and so forth, and allows you to toggle through two different riding modes. This motorcycle over here gets two modes, that's rain and road. Even the traction control over here, you have rain, road, and off. So it's a bit more neatly laid out and a bit more organized. The brightness on the console is slightly better, so it's a bit more readable under bright conditions. However, I wish that they had a shift light built into it, because this engine revs up so high and so fast that you don't realize by the time you're hitting the RPM and you have to keep your eyes down. So a dedicated shift light would have been a nice inclusion, but again, these are minor gripes. It doesn't break the deal for me. This also accommodates Bluetooth connectivity, so both the TFTs over here are on par. However, if I had to choose one in terms of preference, I think I prefer the one on the Tiger Sport, purely down to its simplicity and its better functionality. Both these motorcycles have pretty good switchgear. However, when you actually compare the two of them side by side, I have to say that the Triumph is slightly better in terms of overall quality. The finish, the button feeling, the press, the way it reacts, I think it's just slightly, ever so slightly better. And it's not a huge difference, but it's a difference you'd notice if you were riding these motorcycles back to back. Alright, now coming to the verdict. A few things you'd want to consider before buying these two motorcycles is A, how touring friendly they are. Both these motorcycles can go touring, however, if I have to add something, I would say that the Versys does it much better with a pillion and extra luggage. However, the Tiger Sport seems better off while doing it with just luggage and a rider. So that's something to take into consideration. In terms of service, now, for the Versys over here, you have to service it every 5,000 kilometers or 6 months, whichever one comes first. Whereas the Triumph over here, it's every 12,000 kilometers or 1 year, whichever one comes first. So you can enjoy your Triumph a bit longer than you can enjoy a Versys before you have to visit your nearest service center. Another thing over here worth considering is that both these motorcycles here come with a 2-year warranty as standard. However, the Versys only over here gives you a 30,000 kilometer range, whereas the Triumph is an unlimited range to your warranty. So I think that's a much better proposition when it comes to warranty and reliability. There is one thing that is in the Versys' favor, which is it has a slightly better dealer network than the Triumph does. But if that's not something that bothers you, if you don't plan to go off the beaten chart that often and require a service when you do so and plan your trips in advance, I don't think that's something you will have to encounter. Now, after riding both these motorcycles, I have to admit that when it comes to just sheer touring, and if I'm not trying to have fun and if I'm just trying to get there from point A to point B comfortably, the Versys does the job just fine, except for those tires which do bother me a bit. The Triumph, however, seems a lot more adventurous. And when I say adventure, I don't mean going off-road, I mean just on the tarmac. It just seems a lot more fun. It'll egg you into leaning into corners a lot more. It'll push you to go faster. Its brakes inspire more confidence. Its tires inspire more confidence. And overall, to me, it's the more fun motorcycle of the two over here. There is about a 1.5 lakh price difference between these two, with the Triumph being slightly more expensive by 1.5 lakh depending on what state you're in. And for that money, what exactly are you getting for the Triumph? You're getting a slightly more premium brand over there. You are getting the longer service interval. You're getting slightly better brakes, slightly better tires, slightly better suspension, and just, to me, a more fun engine. So if I had to put my money, I think I would go with the Tiger Sport. However, both these motorcycles over here are very capable and you won't go wrong either way you choose. However, if you are the kind of motorcyclist that really likes to have fun and ride spiritedly, I feel like you'd enjoy the Triumph a lot more. Whereas if you just want to get to point A and point B, you have a pillion along, I feel like when it comes to sheer utility, the Versys will do better. But for me, it's the Tiger Sport. Please let us know down in the comments section what you think of our comparison and if there's any other motorcycles that you'd like for us to compare. This is Gavin Rodriguez signing off. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like, share and subscribe to the Top Gear India YouTube channel.